a while back, I was visiting an online, message board for Eastern Christians. And the people who primarily dominate this message boards are converts to Eastern Orthodoxy.
Mm-hmm.
Probably 90% former Protestant, maybe some former Catholics who are now Orthodox. And they tend to be, more Orthodox than the Patriarch of Constantinople, if you know what I'm saying.
Oh, yeah.
And, the zeal of converts, and you can't blame them for that. But somebody got on there who was very deeply troubled, and troubled by something that he had just read. He was very, very upset and worried. So, he had been Protestant, he had become Orthodox, and he kind of brought his anti-Catholicism with him. And many of the folks on that particular site, they are very anti-Catholic, and for them, Orthodoxy equals not Catholic. So he came across some writings by Saint Mark of Ephesus. Saint Mark of Ephesus is an Eastern Orthodox saint, one of the pillars of Orthodoxy. Is often credited with, torpedoing the reunion of Florence, although that really is inaccurate in my opinion.
Right.
But he came across some of his writings and were curious about them because, the Orthodox Church holds this fellow in extremely high esteem. He began reading the writings of Saint Mark of Ephesus, and this threw him into a tailspin. And you can probably guess why. Because when you actually sit down and read the writings of St. Mark of Ephesus, he's more Catholic than most Catholics are today.
Yep.
The things he asserts are things that a lot of the modern Orthodox apologists vehemently reject. Really, if you dive in, it's remarkable. He makes a pretty strong case for papal primacy even. He didn't like the idea of the Pope being beyond reproach in case there was a heretical Pope, but in the core teachings on the Catholic understanding of the Bishop of Rome, a lot of them you can find in his writings. Well, this fellow on this forum, he was reading St. Mark of Ephesus's writings on purgatory. He was getting all ready to hear a good rejection of the Western belief, and he got on there extremely confused and upset because St. Mark of Ephesus immediately says, we reject the notion of purgatory because we don't believe in a literal fire, right? There's no literal fire, and it's not a temporal place created by God. There's no third place between heaven and hell, and there's no literal fire. And then he goes on to explain why they believe that there's this purification that must take place after death, and how praying for people in that state helps them. And he lays out essentially the Catholic belief in purgatory. So this fellow was really disturbed because he said, I was always told that as Orthodox Christians, we reject purgatory, but here I'm reading St. Mark of Ephesus explaining purgatory and essentially laying out a solid case for it, while at the same time condemning those who believe in a literal fire. This little story kind of illustrates half the problem, which is people are so concerned with defining themselves against something else that they oftentimes don't look at the fullness of their own tradition. And the fullness of their own tradition within Eastern Orthodoxy is this. Their understanding of what takes place after death is essentially the same as what Catholics believe. They may not use the word purgatory, but it's at the core the same beliefs. Years ago, I had a situation where I was sharing an office with somebody. This is back when I was a grad student, and I shared an office with several people, actually. But there's one fellow I was in this office with a lot who was an Orthodox priest. He was with the Greek Orthodox Archdiocese. Wonderful man. Brilliant, very holy. Truly holy, kind, compassionate priest. He was much more interested in being a disciple of Christ than he was arguing with people, right? I admire that. He and I had a long discussion about purgatory one time, and he said to me, listen, we believe the same thing. Yeah. We believe the same thing on this, and anyone who says otherwise is just looking to nitpick. But at the core, we have the same faith. And I remember during that period, I was working with EWTN answering questions. I'd go on EWTN's website and add like a forum on there where I'd answer people's questions about Eastern Catholicism. I was one of their online experts. And somebody was asking me about the Eastern Christian understanding of purgatory. And I wanted to get it right. So I wrote out this whole thing and I kind of ran it past this Orthodox priest. And he's like, yeah, that's it. That's exactly what we believe. This is accurate. And I posted it on there. And then like a few weeks later, on some Orthodox forum, they cut and pasted my answer, put it on there, and then raked me over the coals for misrepresenting Eastern Christianity. The truth of the matter is the belief system when it comes to this is really the same, just the terminology is different. That's pretty much it.
Father Deacon, I don't mean to be polemical in any way, but I want to be very clear. The majority of the people that do the critiquing, I doubt they've ever even read Mark of Ephesus. I've rarely encountered, and I have a lot of great moderators here that are Eastern Orthodox. People don't realize I've got a lot of my moderators are Orthodox. I probably don't know more than maybe one or two that have read Mark of Ephesus. So it is not I am not attacking them. My only emphasis is read your great patriarchal figures and realize we have much more in common. There should be more light and really the love of Christ and charity than a lot of the times than we are able to see. Now, what I put there on the image right there is the language of Mark of Ephesus, homily 1 on purgatory.
Yes.
You brought up an incredible point, Father Deacon, because when I was preparing for a debate in purgatory, it was a couple of years back, I remember, I pulled up the homily, and I remember, Father Deacon, your words are echoing in my head. 4.5 years ago, I said, all right, anti-Catholic, totally against purgatory, Mark of Ephesus. I pulled it up. What on earth? There is every affirmation we read there. We can affirm it as a Catholic. Nowhere has the church ever formally defined that the fire is a literal fire. But then for people today, Father Deacon, you hear it very often. Oh, well, we don't believe in that kind of post-mortem punishment. It is compatible. Mark tells you, for some are cleansed by fear, while others are devoured by the gnawing of conscience. And then he tells you, with more torment than any fire, others are cleansed only the very terror before the divine glory. Now, I'm very glad that you did bring up Mark of Ephesus, Father Deacon, because even Mark of Ephesus, even his Mariology is very different from a lot of modern day Orthodox. Now, I want to be very clear, not all of them. But today we're living in a time where I want to tell my Eastern brothers and sisters, you don't have to believe that you have to follow every little thing that you read online that other people tell you, you have to follow that. Well, look, the Mariology of Mark of Ephesus is very different than what we've seen it turn into today. And I don't want to go off on a completely different topic, but I think you get where I'm going at, that there has been a kind of a bit of an evolution and a moving away from, I think of St. Gregory Palamas as well. His Mariology quite different than the Mariology of online individuals you might find in 2022. I wonder, what are your thoughts on that and your advice? How do we maybe dialogue with our Eastern brothers and sisters and let them know, look, believing in these things perhaps is not uniquely Catholic. You're allowed to believe them as well, and you shouldn't be afraid to affirm them.
An interesting exercise. I've never done this, but I've thought about it. Is to go onto these websites with these extremely zealous ultra-Orthodox people, and without naming your source, start quoting Mark of Ephesus and put out some of the things he believed. And they would immediately, my guess is they would immediately just start ripping it to shreds and saying how wrong it is, how heretical it is, not realizing that they're condemning one of the pillars of orthodoxy. Because really, it is that, the difference is that stark.